I will introduce you to the tragedy of the Commonwealth. I do not claim that this accounting is wholly accurate or unbiased. However, it is as accurate as I can make it. This is to say that it is more detailed than the wonderful story told by Ish. I have also attempted to distill as much of the Discord drama as possible for your enjoyment. This is the story of the group of Mykonos, led by myself, and its place in the tragedy of the Commonwealth. Day 1 began without issue. Ish had gathered all 1,000 players in a single zone in order to say some opening words and randomly disseminate us across the map. I ended up on the northern half of the southern archipelago. We didn't know it at the time, but there were 3 southern islands, while there was only 1 northern island. The northern island would be informally referred to as Yggdrasil for its enormous tree, and the southern island as Pandora for its political volatility. Immediately upon being teleported to the map, I lagged out. Moving and voice chat was disabled. I had a rather awkward time trying to break blocks, only for them to unceremoniously pop back in. After a rather long period of bug fixing, we were finally able to move past 3 blocks without being at risk of having an in-game seizure. It didn't take long for us to come upon a rather quaint mountainside, and it was decided that it would do for the time being. It was below this mountain range that we began to mine and gather resources. Considering a number of close calls collecting resources due to trees and mining accidents, gathering together the Commonwealth was an easier task said than done. Most of us made it by the end of day 1, but there was the notable absence of Arthon seen within the ramshackle camp that we had started assembling. I learned that Arthon had decided to make a temporary base camp. A quick expedition was made to lead our wayward countrymen to our gathering spot. The trip was rather long, but ultimately we found the members of Arthon. Unfortunately, after a fruitless conversation with the people who nominally considered themselves Commonwealth citizens, I was directed to Arthon's king, Wolfram, who was noticeably absent. The Arthonians were unwilling to move away from their mine shaft and assorted shacks without a direct order from Wolfram. Disheartened, as this was a setback for our goal of making a city, we made our way back home. We passed by many different groups looking to stake claims to the land for their own, including a mass migration of Luminarans amicably passing us by. The day came to a close as we set our sights on our mountain home once more. The second day began with the sun frozen overhead. The cracks in the foundation of the Commonwealth were beginning to become ever more visible. Wolfram still doggedly refused to join the rest of the Commonwealth, as was previously agreed upon. Hours of Discord discussions the night before had made apparent that there was more at stake than merely a disagreement in where to build our planned city. The majority of the Commonwealth was gathered at the base of the mountain that we had claimed as our own. A small amphitheater-esque series of stone slabs were set down to create a podium and seating. From there, we laid out our objectives for the day, and some small speeches were made. The many members of the Commonwealth were arrayed before us, though a specific group was noticeably absent. It was there that we met our figurative Hermes, I'm happy. Each major civilization had a member of staff overseeing it and recording major events. Ours happened to be an initially amicable fellow who would pop in from time to time, ominously looking down from on high. As the crowd dispersed, I tasked Phoebas, the counselor for Gauntlet, to scout out the territory around us and to potentially find a better location to build the capital of the Commonwealth. After he set out, Coraline approached me to go with them to Tricolor, where supposedly a major island meeting was to be held. I tasked the remaining members of the Commonwealth to mine sand and resources, whilst I attended what I thought would be a short meeting. After some quick goodbyes, we departed for Tricolor. It was quite the journey to reach the nation of Tricolor. The world map was not released, so everyone was still relying on coordinate points and rough graphs. After finding a coastline, we eventually made our way to the meeting point, fashionably late. What commenced was what could be summed up as pointless political grandstanding. Saparata was overseeing the meeting as a neutral third party, but his oversight merely prevented others from talking over the current speaker. All the while, the meeting broke into two political blocs. In short, to explain these political ideologies, they formed out of the state of the two major islands, blocked off by Ish until a later date. The northern island, Yggdrasil, was an inhospitable hellscape. Boiling water, shattered plains, a volcano, looming mountains, and a single gnarled tree rising above it all. Pandora was by comparison an idyllic island, rich in natural resources. Even our ore spawn rates were significantly better. Island 1 was rather unhappy with their lot. The first block at the meeting, the one that the Commonwealth came to be in support of, was created on the platform of unification against Island 1. The second block, led by Tricolor, had pre-planned ties to Yggdrasil and wanted to send aid to them, or rather, their ally Westhelm, the largest group in the event themed after ancient Rome. The meeting drew out, longer and longer, each side proposing ideas, and those ideas being shot down in turn by their detractors. Ultimately, Tricolor proposed that some nations move to be closer to them, while others balked at the idea of their ties to Westhelm and refused such a proposal. Before the meeting came to a close, Coraline told me to wait, that they had an idea. Barely hearing her, and vaguely still paying attention to the meeting, I said all right, and she set out back to the Commonwealth. After the meeting came to an unceremonious and inconclusive end, I was invited by Flux, who initially voiced the pro-unification sentiments at the meeting. Following his group, I unfortunately ran out of stamina and was left behind. Alone and quite down about my current situation, I made my way back to the Commonwealth and found it empty. Coraline had, in my absence, taken upon herself to circumvent the ruling council of the Commonwealth and gathered up everyone at the base of the hill and set off towards Tricolor. None of this was communicated. She explained after the fact that she thought that she had the authority. This was a threefold problem. First of all, not everyone had found our initial base camp. Some were still making their way over after visiting some of the other nations. Phoebaz and much of Gauntlet were still off on their expedition and were at the time far in the southern jungles. While Wolfram was becoming increasingly dissatisfied with how little power he held in the Commonwealth, as he had not elected to make himself a council member even though he was the leader of Arthon. Eventually, a vote was held, and it was decided that the Commonwealth would resettle its original location and turn it into our capital. Unfortunately, the site was in disrepair as resource gathering was quite intense and the beaches were scoured for the precious sand. The day ended not as the server shut down, but hours after. Arthonian relations had soured further. They were never truly honest in their aims for the Commonwealth. Most of us understood the Commonwealth as an equal partnership. Wolfram, Arthon's king, understood it more loosely. He envisioned it with Arthon as its leader. The combination of Arthon's refusal to move from their initial settlement and Coraline's misstep led to her temporary, self-imposed exile. Wolfram threatened to leave the Commonwealth. Weeks of planning before the event were at risk of being thrown away because he was dissatisfied with the balance of power. Unfortunately for Wolfram, the document Arthon released to the Commonwealth leadership detailing their demands was their personal, annotated document with notes as to what they wanted to accomplish. Unfortunately for us, their goals at the time seemed to be total dominion over the Commonwealth. Wolfram sought to make himself dictator and create a new senate that disproportionately would favor Arthonian citizens. Feeling betrayed, I let my pride get the better of me, and I leaked the document to the wider Commonwealth. It took Coraline 4 hours in order to walk Wolfram back from the edge. An agreement was struck, one that not all were happy with. The beginnings of what would soon become the Acropolis were initially conceptualized on day 3. It would be a spanning complex of barracks, meeting rooms, defenses, and a large storehouse. Work started smoothly on the foundation, and while I was organizing the construction, Coraline and Zekor, Arthon's lead diplomat, met in the Arthonian settlement. Certain tasks were delegated to specific members of the Commonwealth: mining, farming, and foresting. We had initial issues with farming due to the number of different styles of farms and the uncoordinated way they were organized. We also had our first official in quite certainly preventable death. One of our foresters, in the process of clear-cutting the titanic birch trees, died from fall damage. We were eagerly awaiting, more specifically, I was eagerly awaiting the arrival of our wayward Arthonians. Their numbers would greatly expedite the creation of the Acropolis and would be a big step towards making a functioning, planned city. The Commonwealth was shocked into inaction, while the killer escaped. Wolfram was dead, and with his death, so too was Arthon dead to the Commonwealth. What was left was a shambling corpse in its place. On the 4th day, we were making headway in constructing our capital building, the Acropolis. But all was not well and truly good with the Commonwealth. Arthon was paralyzed. Its new leader, EH, proved uncooperative, refusing to move from what was becoming readily apparent as their permanent settlement, threatening their own safety and the safety of ourselves in the process. After all, could not another assassin strike them and succeed again? They chose to prioritize what they viewed as their independence over what would be best for everyone as a whole. The other Commonwealth members were busy building their own monuments, as Coria and their large flag, and the Gauntlet founded Bingo's Bread and finished their gauntlet. Later in the day, Coraline, along with Zektor, the new Arthonian counselor, attended a meeting hosted by Saparata, the arbiter of the previous island-wide meeting. It was hosted in a rather interesting copy of the capstone temple of our Acropolis. The meeting was to discuss island unification and the series of assassinations across the island. I could have attended that meeting. I almost went. But since Coraline was our chief diplomat, and the fiasco that was the first Island 2 meeting, I declined to go. It should have been a rather uneventful meeting. Nothing should have come of it. But once again, the Commonwealth was in an uproar. The original Council of 5 had only 3 original members still alive. Zekor, the Arthonian diplomat, survived, and only inflamed Arthonian independence. As the council was left paralyzed because our chief diplomat was dead, and had never included any of us in any of her diplomatic dealings. And with that, the entirety of our diplomatic relations vanished. The Acropolis soon became my focus. It was an ambition. It represented what my original group, Mykonos, wanted to accomplish: to establish a city. But if we couldn't make a city, we would make a monument in its place. On day 5, Saparata had agreed to go to trial, thinking that hosting his trial in the Acropolis would unify us and bring about no small amount of prestige. I urged us to convince the other leaders of Island 2 to host the trial at the Acropolis, and ultimately I was successful. Yet the Acropolis was far from complete, and lacking the sheer amount of sand needed would surely hold us back. Leveraging the trial, I was able to conscript from across the entirety of Island 2. They came from Concumul, a nominal ally of Mykonos, Aperion, Luminara, Tricolor. They came by the dozens to mine away, slaving for sand. This was truly the first and final act of Island Unity, all in the effort to finish the construction of the Acropolis for the premier trial of the event. The construction itself went smoothly, despite some hiccups. The trial, on the other hand, it was at this point that I was slowly becoming the key decision-maker of the Commonwealth. Roycan turned himself in to the Caste Coalition. He sought amnesty and a fair trial, after those who had hired him had failed to pay him. We were going to put him on trial, with the judge being none other than Saparata. In essence, we had no judge. I had to last minute find a volunteer judge and trust that he would coordinate the trial while I was coordinating the finishing of the Acropolis, as we were even building it as people arrived for the trial. Players came from every corner of Island 2, cramped wall to wall into the Acropolis, spilling out onto its steps. It was the closest I came to achieving my ambition, to see a structure we made used for its intended purpose. Groups coming together and having conversations on its steps, moving and gathering like the flow of a stream that we built. Initially, we had issues with public cooperation during the trials. People were becoming increasingly paranoid of dripstone, even though our roof was visibly hollow and made of slabs. It didn't stop some from disrupting the event. In exchange for their support in hosting the trial at our Acropolis, Luminara insisted that they handle all security for the event. When the time arrived, we all stood waiting for Saparata. Appearing before the members of the court, his opening statements, while important contextually, as he rightly accused Flux for the assassinations, were ultimately of little importance to us during the trial itself. Witnesses were called, and the trial dragged on, and on, and on. I was told before the trial that Saparata had already agreed to a guilty verdict. Now, this was incorrect information, but considering how long the trial was dragging, I urged Time Bomb, the judge, to cut the trial short. And after dealing with an increasingly irritable Gauntlet, I urged us to execute Saparata off of their massive fist, jutting out over the mountaintops. The trial was called to a close, and the witnesses were silenced. The execution would take place. We did not have time to finish our walls, only barely completing the top of the Acropolis. The crowd became unruly. Luminara did not have control over the situation. Their guards rushed out with the crowd, completely disregarding their responsibilities. And in a rush to get to the fist, Saparata escaped. The trial for Rorican was a much smaller affair, and one which showcased my growing apathy. Zekor, the Arthonian diplomat, approached me and stated he had evidence implicating Gauntlet, and that he wanted my support in bringing this out of the trial. But after dealing with so many broken promises from Arthon, failures in their obligations, and their arrogance, I simply stated that I didn't care. Rorican was put on trial and sentenced to death, and he too escaped. Though I did not know it at the time, he had help, and a convenient escape tunnel was dug for him. I'm Happy interviewed us. After all, it was nothing short of an abject failure for the Commonwealth. The Commonwealth was at what I thought would be its lowest point. The day ended. Day 6 was a build day. Staff mandated a strict no-griefing policy. The aim was for groups to finish their builds, though, since there was no conflict, many took it as a way to gain safe passage and tour the southern archipelago. We finished much of the Acropolis. The storehouse was completed, and the facade was presentable. We even finished our amphitheater and hosted a wonderful concert, inviting as many as we could to enjoy our structure. I even acquired the rights to a freaking turkey's soul during the concert, as he had sold it to a member of state staff, and staff had conveniently lost it. Zekor and Arthon had this entire time been leading an investigation into the death of Wolfram. What came to light was less than flattering. Half of the Commonwealth Council had been party to his death, and my leaking of the internal Arthonian document drove Gauntlet to assassinate Wolfram. What Arthon had kept secret is that Rorican was not the only assassin. Cosmic Chrome, a member of the Gauntlet, was there as well and participated in the assassination. Mykonos having spent most of its time building the Acropolis, was severely undergeared. We spent much of the beginning of the day underground, arming ourselves. Yet as we were mining beneath the Acropolis, the Commonwealth spiraled ever downwards. Zekor, who had become the new counselor for Arthon, and Zarkmark had gone to attend yet another Island 2 meeting in the middle of the water as a safety precaution. The island was becoming ever more paranoid. It was there that Zekor signed the death warrant of the Commonwealth. He demanded before all of Island 2's representatives in the name of the Commonwealth the deaths of Phoebaz, Cosmic Chrome, 1EJP, Tiaki, a representative of the Gauntlet who was also in attendance at that very meeting, who left in a rage, forever swearing off the Commonwealth, as the rest of Island 2 signed their death warrants. Days of arguing, miscommunication, and a blatant disregard for each other had led up to this moment. As Coria sided with Gauntlet, and I, seeing the Commonwealth crumble around me, was stuck impotent as Zekor demanded the death of Gauntlet members before another island-wide meeting. I had delegated diplomacy to him, and this was the result. I thought he would hold the Commonwealth's interests in mind. Instead, he only cared for furthering Arthon's goals, which was revenge for Wolfram's death. The Commonwealth was shattered. And soon, Gauntlet was seen heading off to Westhelm, a deal seemingly struck with their emperor, Spood. This was not the origin of our conflict with Westhelm. For that, we have to go back to the beginning. The Acropolis was not built by myself alone. It was a collaborative effort between Josh, myself, Arabera, and many others, including Westhelm's build lead, Knight Arcturus. Knight Arcturus had been an early member of Mykonos, but had left before the event started because he won the vote to become the building senator of Westhelm. Throughout the event, we had kept steady contact. They, along with a number of other Westhelm builders, were disgruntled with Spood's rule, enough so that it convinced Caboose to wish to return to Mykonos. What truly pushed him over the edge, though, was the failure of his aqueduct to appease the moderators to remove the damaging boiling water of Island 1. Then, Caboose was falsely blamed for the death of a fellow Westhelm senator. Spood desired to use his Colosseum to host a great gladiatorial game, and who better to be its first victim than one of its principal designers? Knight Arcturus initially agreed to die fighting, but changed his mind once he discovered that the game would be rigged, with a diamond-enchanted axe being thrown into the ring towards his opponent. And so, Knight Arcturus fled to the Acropolis to seek refuge with his people. Spood was furious. His planned gladiatorial games were ruined. Yet, for us, this was an opportunity. I saw it as an opportunity. The Commonwealth was dead in all but name, but I still thought that we had allies. I was told by Zekor, who up until now had still been handling diplomatic relations for the Commonwealth, defunct as it was, that we still had allies. Knight Arcturus told me that Spood was going to send 2 diplomats and a light guard to take him back to Westhelm, that he and the Westhelm citizens who fled with him were going to ambush them and slaughter them on the steps of the Acropolis. It would be war, but it would be a war to regain what prominence and pride we once had. We had allies, did we not? The players of Island 2 spent so much of its early days fearing Island 1. Surely, we could rally them to the Acropolis to fight a good war. And so, as everyone was required to do, we passed our plans to our assigned state staff member, I'm Happy. He was ecstatic. The day ended, and I slept. On day 9, despite not having the backing of state staff, we still tried to implement our plan. But Spud was tipped off by one of the leaders I tried convincing earlier. Spud sent his entire army to capture Knight Arcturus. I called upon our allies. The enemy was at our steps. But no one arrived. Thinking this would be a moment of triumph, only to see Westhelm's entire army walk up our steps. My morale broke. I fled. Time and again, I struggled to regain my pride, to regain what little Mykonos had. Through the Commonwealth, through the Acropolis, through this failed war. I wandered in a daze, through this failed war. I wandered in a daze. I witnessed the finishing of the Great Conquistador Temple, the construction of a theater greater in size than even Westhelm's Colosseum, and still I walked onwards. Yet Knight Arcturus was nowhere to be found. By then, he and his people had finished their villa and retired. And so, on the next day, I was approached by Spud. Spud's right hand, Spider, was growing tired of the event and wanted their death to matter. Spud wanted a war. His desire for prestige and the failure to fabricate a conflict left him still desiring more of the spotlight. Seeing there being no other option at the time, I reluctantly agreed to his proposal. I even offered another solution: to make the Commonwealth a vassal of Westhelm, in order to at least get back at the rest of Island 2 for their perceived slight against us by not coming to our defense. But that was rejected. Spider would approach the Acropolis alone. We would invite representatives from across Island 2. Acropolis. Spider would rant and rave and demand Knight Arcturus be returned to Westhelm. He would do what he could to make us the victims, and allow us to rally the rest of Island 2 to our defense. Then, he would demand my answer, and I would, in response, kick him off the side of the Acropolis. It was a flawed plan, but it was one I was forced into. By this point, I would do anything to regain my pride, even fight a losing war. Our diplomatic building, named after the late Coraline, was the stage. Representatives from all over came, and I was given a script. It was nothing like what I agreed to. It made Westhelm into the victims and vilified the Commonwealth. Spider, in his desire to make himself have a more meaningful death, wrote himself into the role of a martyr, and made myself the villain. My face scrunched up, even as I said my lines. But my anger took over. All this effort, the failed promises, the failures both personal and otherwise, leading up to this moment. I said my lines, and I killed Spider. And Westhelm declared war. No one would be coming to our aid. Josh and our General Quack volunteered to return the remains of Spider to Westhelm and accept the declaration of war. Spud killed them. Spud had forgotten to let Gauntlet know about this setup, and Gauntlet, seeking to kill Zekor, assassinated me as well. But they did so while I was AFK, so I was returned, with the stipulation that I would die in a war. On day 10, the event had not stood still for us. The Caste Coalition, seeking their own spotlight, were embroiled in a feud with Infernace for ordering the death of Mardio, Infernace's mining lead. The axis of the event was shifting toward their conflict, especially since Flux had decided to side with Infernace, and Saprata, who had been garnering support in Westhelm, sided with Cass, and the coalition forming against them. Westhelm sided with the coalition, And with much of Island 2 doing the same, we found ourselves sympathizing with Infernace. Cast aside and forgotten, we marched across the islands and joined in the final battle on the side of Infernace. But not before saying our final farewells. We wrote our final words and each put a memento of ourselves in the mausoleum. A single item that represented each of us. For myself, it was a single block of sandstone. It was at Infernace that we made our final preparations. Speeches were held in their throne room, and we came to realize that we were in unfamiliar territory. The castle, while impressive, was lacking in defensive features that we were aware of, and the secret escape routes that they had prepared were also unknown to us. The peacekeepers descended the steps of the mountain, cutting a bloody swath through the coalition. They bought us a slim chance at victory, killing nearly a quarter of the coalition. But enemy spies illegally leaked the location of our traps against the wishes of staff, and we had to fight for the castle. The battle was fierce. An enemy shield wall crossed the bridge, our arrows mixing with those of Infernace, pelting our enemies. But we were driven back. We fled to the tower where we debated on what we should do. It was there we saw the Infernace Queen alone. We decided to make a stand. I was ordained to die. It might as well be an interesting death. It was there I once again dueled Cosmic Chrome. He had killed me once, and I would have my chance at killing him in turn. I would have my chance at killing him.
Hold out condition from the castle. You would not believe where I'm from the castle.
I may not have been able to see it, but the Acropolis was finished in my absence. Many members of Mykonos survived the Battle of Infernace, or got lost on the long march to the Infernace castle. Besides a small hiccup where Gauntlet returned to gloat over their victory, the Acropolis was lived in. It was a monument to failed pride and the tragedy of unchecked ego. The Commonwealth was ultimately a failed project. It formed out of the desire for smaller, separate nations to mean something in the face of the Goliaths of the event, like Westhelm. Yet our ego and pride prevented us from truly merging either together or merging into a larger nation, like so many other small groups did in the lead-up to the event. The Commonwealth could have been so much more. Had Arthon not been driven by independence to the point of mediocrity, had Ascoria and Aledonia and myself put our desires aside, had we not let our anger at each other's failures get in the way of acknowledging our own. I, more than others, fell prey to my own anger, yet while mixed with regret, I can't help but look at what we built and accomplished with pride. Mykonos did something. We had an experience worth remembering, and that's something I can take pride in.